Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for another very special edition of WOWSA Live. We're going to speak with Ned Denison, who just came back from Italy and competing in one of the world's most famous open water swims, the Capri-Napoli swim. Welcome, Ned.
Thank you, Steve.
And tell us how you actually got from from Ireland to Italy with COVID and all those.
Yeah, so as everyone knows, there's all sorts of travel restrictions, and it changes almost weekly. Ireland, for the past couple of months, has had what's called a green list, and the green list are those countries where you can go and not isolate on the way back. And Italy also, as a way of attracting tourists, they're quite generous with who can travel there and not self-isolate for 2 weeks. So the stars all aligned. This swim had been scheduled for June, and it got postponed till the 11th of September. And it just all seemed to work at the last minute, that Italy was on the green list. Ireland was still okay. Interestingly, Ireland's getting rid of the green list next week and going to something else. And the cases in Ireland have started to go up dramatically in the last couple of days. So they'll probably go on everyone's bad list for a while. The airport was nearly deserted. I could park in short-term car parking for less than I used to be able to park in long-term car parking. The plane was maybe 20% full. Everyone was wearing masks. Naples airport was fairly deserted. The taxi driver was wearing a mask. And I have to say, in Naples, they were very serious about the whole COVID situation. I hadn't worn a mask until about 10 days ago. The Italians have been wearing them since February, and I would say it's 99% compliance. I've had my temperature taken more times in the last week than I have in the previous 5 years. And we practice social distancing and sane practices.
Wow. Wow. Now, you always have to balance issues. You balance weather and water temperature and all these issues on a channel or marathon swim. But now you had to balance your own ability to train at home and the total unknown whether this swim was actually going to happen or not. How did you balance all those completely unknowns and still focus on your swim?
So I had my goals set out for the year. Just a little over 1 million meters of swimming. The Cabo swim, 32K in early March. I was lucky to get that in. And then April and May, I was able to swim about 5 days. The pools closed and we weren't allowed to travel to the ocean. So literally had about 7 weeks of no swimming for the first time in 15 years or whatever it is. So that was a challenge mentally to keep imagining I could do it. I managed to catch up all of my meters, but they were done in the ocean in 3K and 4.5K sets. And what I missed was months of pool speed training. And we typically would have done, 250 hundreds on a 100 second sort of sets in the pool. And I just didn't really fancy doing long swims in the reasonably cold seas around Cork, Ireland. So I didn't have the speed or the distance training, but I got the meters in and convinced myself I was ready.
Yeah. Okay, great. And when you were in Italy, there was actually other people who were in Italy that I wouldn't have expected. I mean, you met a bunch of Brazilians who were actually training in Portugal. Tell us about that.
Well, I didn't actually meet them. They were in the professional swim the week before us.
Okay.
So Ana Marcela Cunha, the champion from Brazil, and Alan de Carno, they had decided to leave Brazil months and months ago and go to Portugal to train, where they had better access to facilities. So they were able to fly into Italy, but no other South Americans were allowed to get there, and no Americans made the trip. I was originally going with Dr. Mark Smitherman, but I'm not sure he could have got to Italy. He would have had to quarantine, and going back, he would have had to quarantine as well. Okay. So it was the first time in the professional swim history that 2 women came in first and second. And in case anybody thinks that it was a weak field, they broke the record. And
Yeah.
Anna Kuna, who held the record, she was 1 second behind Brindy from Italy. So the pro swim was apparently quite exciting at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. And when the Dr. Mark, he's an American from Florida, correct?
He is indeed a Triple Crown swimmer.
Okay. So because of all these COVID restrictions, he did make it. Was there anybody else that you knew who was planning to go, and for whatever reason their travel was?
No, I didn't know anybody, but I know for sure there were some cancellations
Okay.
for COVID travel reasons.
Okay. And then when you were there in Capri, following the professional race, you're in the marathon swimming world, you're a young 62, but young 62 doesn't really cut it in Capri-Napoli, right?
I don't think anybody over the age of 49 ever did the swim, and that would have been Claudio Plit from Argentina, the Imshoff honoree, and Claudio was timeless at 49. We can't really put me in any sort of swimming category with Claudio.
Yeah. Yeah. And who was on your crew? What was your makeup?
So they supplied a judge, and they supplied somebody to operate the boat. My crew was Thomas W. Koffler, who was the first Italian Triple Crowner. And until about a week ago, he was the only Italian Triple Crowner. He was in Dover right before the Naples trip, crewing for Sabrina, who is now the second Italian and first female Italian Triple Crowner. Thomas has been to Cork a number of times as a swimmer. And the last time he was there, he was as a volunteer. So Thomas has kind of given up the long swims, but he's now doing the payback. He's doing man weeks of volunteer work to balance out that ledger sheet for himself.
Yeah. But even though there was a pro race the week before, and then your amateur event that you did, they still had a very strict time cutoff. So it wasn't like you had all day long to do this. You had 36 kilometers that you had to meet some cutoff time, correct?
It was always 10K.
Okay.
And the 10K is not some sort of fickle, the organizer wants to go to dinner. It's based on, by the time you get to Capri and the boats arrive and the time you get back, the boats are fairly small. They don't have night lights. And then the boats have to go further down the coast that evening. So they're not allowed to be out there at night. So that there's some very good reasons for the cutoff. In my case, they gave me 10 hours and 13 minutes. And at that point, the harbor master was going, you're done, folks. When they gave me the sign, I stopped and optimistically asked if I had to wait for a ferry to pass by, but it was more definitive than that.
Yeah. So describe the race for people who've never been there.
So there's a technical briefing the night before. One of the interesting things about the swim, and I suspect it has to do with the professional history of the swim, is the person operating the boat is not exactly steering the boat. So Thomas, unbeknownst to him, he was in charge of directing the boat, which is very unusual for kind of solo epic swimmers. And I suspect the reason is that in a professional race, the line that the boat could take could be incredibly important. And they probably had somebody raise a big stink about a bad line that the boat took, costing them places and money. So at the early part of the swim, it was pretty easy for Thomas. He said, follow the boats in front of Ned, of which there were a fair few. After 5-6 hours, I think those boats were getting a little hard to see, and it was aiming for a part of the mountain ahead. And then towards the very end, it was that kind of yellow house next to the finish line. But that was different. We all took a boat out to Capri that morning quite early. I think it was a 4:45 wake up or 4:45 departure, something early. We walked 50 meters to a small sports club. We changed, got greased up, all those things. The crews met their boats, and at a certain point, off we went. The water was clear, it was beautiful, very calm for the first while, and for to my surprise afterwards, I really made some incredible progress in the first half. I got about halfway in a little more than 4 hours, which still surprises me, but I have the splits from Thomas's watch. And then we ran into fairly substantial waves coming from the left, kind of short, choppy things that break. Nothing, it wasn't a rolling sort of wave. And I suspect there was a current coming from the other direction, because I know for the next 2 hours, all Thomas was doing was doing this, which either I was swimming 30 degrees the wrong way, or I was continually being pushed. My pace per 100 meters kind of dropped from 135 to something ugly, 230. There was
Oh,
there was a 240 segment of a mile at one point, which just, it takes a lot to have me go quite that slow. And that was, after that, it calmed down a little bit. My pace over distance improved. But at the end, I was still 1.3 kilometers short of completing the swim.
oh. So it was right there.
Well, Steve, on a normal day, it was right there. But at the end, I wasn't doing a 121 pace like I was at the start. So it was going to be a little further than right there.
Got it. Got it. Now, of the people who were in your competition, you had some fast people, I assume. You had some people who didn't finish. What was sort of the makeup of your of the field?
So there were 5 relays, and some of them were quite young, clearly, excellent pool swimmers, and there were 5 solos. One of them was a former professional racer, Laura, who competed against people like Shelley Taylor Smith.
Yeah.
There was a man who had done it once before, who was quite speedy that first time. There was a guy from Spain who had beaten me in Vigo the year before, and there was another person who I didn't know. The first 2 soloers got in 8.5 something hours. The man from Spain was tagging behind me. He got out at about 5. I never saw the last soloer, but he got out at some point. And then there was that horrible experience of being followed by the trailing safety boat with the big net and the hook. kind of reminded of the wagon that gets the dead horses at the racetrack.
Yeah.
There was a constant presence behind me of the catch the old man before he drops boat.
Yeah. Now, you got to halfway point, 18 kilometers in 4 hours or so. You're at a good pace. Of course, you're feeling this current and the waves and stuff. Was there any indication in the second half of the race that you weren't going to make it, or was this like a surprise to you?
No. At one point, I'd asked how long or how far of distance I had covered in the previous 30 minutes. And the translation came through the Italian of 0.5 miles.
Oh.
And I was going, this is not a good number. 800 meters in a half an hour. I'm not sure I could scull that slow. I mean, it was devastating. And I kind of picked it up and did 0.7 in the next half an hour. So it was, there was a 2-hour patch where it was just ugly.
Okay.
But I mean, I felt fine. Stroke count was, I started at 64, dropped a little bit, down to 62, down to 60 towards the end. And I'm sure I lost a little bit of power, but you don't go from 121 to 240 without some environmental problem somewhere along the way. I mean,
yeah.
Look, that's the sport. If I wanted no environment, I'd stay in the pool.
Yeah. So you gave me the hook. Always disappointing, of course, whether it's Mother Nature or man's cutoff time. You're climbing up on the boat. Are you cussing up a storm? Or are you shaking hands? What was your demeanor?
Okay, so I think this is probably one of the things I'm most proud of in my open water swimming career. Is to organize an event is hard. And the last thing you need when you're organizing an event is somebody being a pain, because 99 people being happy and 1 being a pain, it ruins it for the organizers. So mine's really simple. You get out immediately when they say get out, as quick as you possibly can at your advanced stage. You thank everybody on the boat. Now, we're kind of not in the era of shaking hands anymore, but you thank everybody on the boat. They look like they were near in tears because they've invested a lot.
Yeah.
You thank them all. I asked Thomas, my crew, if we could tip the boat guy. And he said, I don't know if the judge would allow it. And I said, Thomas, I said, I'm kind of disqualified already. It's not like I'm influencing the judge. I'm on the boat. The judge gave the permission, and the boat guy wouldn't take the money. He just kind of held his heart and went, no, not going to happen. And then when I got to shore, Luciano, the organizer, there were tears in his eyes because he really wanted me to make it. So I applauded everybody there. I thanked them. I went to check on the guy from Spain who'd got out in 5 hours. And I just kept saying to myself, don't throw a temper tantrum, don't throw a temper tantrum. And, there was always a 10-hour cutoff. And that was the deal. So you can handle it with some class, or you can be a prat. And I didn't want my impression I made on everybody to be that I was a spoiled child who didn't have the speed to make it in time.
Yeah.
I'm just the old guy who didn't have the speed to make it on time.
So the race ends, you go to shore, you're checking on your people, you're thanking everybody. Very admirable, very admirable. There's a Italian awards ceremony. You're now you're in Naples. What are your impressions of the city?
So Naples is one of those cities with a bit of a reputation. Before I moved to Ireland, Belfast had a reputation. Washington, D.C., Detroit, some of these places have reputations. So my impressions of Naples were incredibly favorable. As a tourist, I went to Pompeii, which has got to be on everybody's top 10 list of sites. I went 40 meters underground to check out the tunnels under Naples. Naples buildings are made from soft stone, which they used to cut with metal saws. So when you built a house in Naples, you went down to get your building materials, made a big hole, put an arch on it, and built up, which is fascinating. And then I saw a piece of sculpture called the Veiled Christ, which look it up on the internet. It's an unbelievable thing. I walked through the city, the small alleyways crowded with people selling fish. They're harvesting mussels 200 meters off the city shore. Everyone was wearing masks. There were scooters with beeping horns. There were small Italian cars zipping through the alleyways. I saw one homeless person in all of Naples. Now, I think there are homeless people, but I think the police encourage them to stay in a slightly different place rather than downtown. So as a tourist, if you were in San Francisco, you would have seen some homeless people. And everybody I met is friendly. And when I didn't know what I was doing, people were making an effort to help me in bad English because my Italian is non-existent. The temperature was fabulous. The sun was shining. And geographically, you stand on the headlands of Naples, you look down the Sorrento coastline, you see Capri, you see the island of Ischia, the coastline, the Bay of Naples is just stunning. It makes San Francisco look a bit shabby. I mean, it's really stunning.
Wow. So it should be on a serious marathon swimmer's bucket list, is what you're saying.
I think it should be on a serious bucket list. Watch your speed and your age closely. You may want to look at doing a relay. You may want to come and volunteer and help the event, or you may just want to watch a finish and take the boat out to Capri and spend a few days out there and be a tourist. But it's a beautiful place.
Yeah. And will we see Ned back in the 2021 event?
Well, I did have a negotiation with the organizer. I did confirm my attendance for next year. It wasn't the motivation for me to be classy getting out of the water, but I tell you what, Steve, it probably didn't hurt.
Yeah.
Because if you got out of the water and you'd thrown a big temper tantrum and you talked about coming back, My guess is he wouldn't be accepting entries just yet.
Yeah.
Luciano is an honoree of the Hall of Fame. I met him in his induction in Melbourne. I always fancied this Capri-Naples swim. It was the most famous European race of, it was a world championship for 20 years or so. I never thought I'd get into it, and never in a million years. And I met Luciano, and he said, Ned, he says, you should come and do my swim sometime. I think he was just being polite. And I said, yes, next year. So he's now invested in me, and we have another honoree from Naples, Albert Coward, who I had met in London a few years ago, and he and his wife hosted me for dinner on one of the nights up on their beautiful apartment overlooking the Naples Bay. So, you know, it's using the connections to meet people you know and enjoy things.
Great, great. 10 out of, or 1 to 10, what would you give it a score? Organization, course, hospitality, location?
The course is a 10. The location is a 10. The organizers were a 10. The weather, the environmental conditions from 4 hours to 6 hours were yeah, you know, disappointing. But look, that's if it had been dead calm the entire swim, it probably would have been disappointing.
Got it.
I wanted a little bit of texture at some point, but maybe not so much, and maybe a little less.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for giving us a report of, again, one of the world's most historic, iconic, and famous swims. And congratulations.
So, Steve, you're not quite 62 yourself now, and I don't believe this one has been on your accomplished list either. Should we maybe go together next year?
Oh, that would be fun.
I'll put a word in for you. Have you done any training recently?
Yeah, with all the pools shut down, I'm actually swimming more in the ocean than I normally do.
Because it'd be a lot of pressure. Because if I were to beat you, we'd never see you again on one of these calls, would we?
Oh, you'll never beat me, Dad.
Thanks very much, Steve.
All
Take
right,
care.
take care. That's not a challenge, that's a joke. Take care.